Why take one vacation with the family when you could take all of them? With Royal Caribbean, you don't just go to the beach. You visit a private island and race down the tallest water slide in North America. You don't just go for a road trip. You ATV and zip line through the jungle. You don't just go somewhere new. You rappel down waterfalls and discover ancient temples. Because this isn't just any vacation. This is all the vacations. Come seek the Royal Caribbean. Ships Registry, Bahamas.
This episode is brought to you by Pepsi Wild Cherry. Pepsi Wild Cherry is bursting with delicious cherry flavor and a sweet, crisp taste that gives you more to go wild for. Getting wild may look different these days, but whether it's opting for a solo Friday binge watch or a big night out, everyone can indulge in their wild side with Pepsi Wild Cherry. Also available in Zero Sugar. So grab a Pepsi Wild Cherry and get wild.
Hello, Duke fans, and welcome to episode 501 of the Duke Basketball Report podcast. Beware the Ides of March. It is March 15th, 2023. I don't remember exactly which year Julius Caesar was murdered, but today's the anniversary, I suppose, of his multiple stab wounds. So let's hope that there are not stab wounds coming for the Blue Devils, who begin their strive for six, I guess, but the first of the John Shire era this week against Oral Roberts. How did I do on the intro there, guys? I'm Sam Klein. I'm your host. I've got Jason and Donald here as always. Jason, did I miss any key details?
No. Et tu, Sam? No. Very, very well done, sir.
Ooh, I like that. Donald Wine is also here. Donald, any comments?
I think the official term is sights on six. I know we've been using it for a few years now, so we might as well keep using it. Sights on six, yeah, with the G replaced by a 6 if you're using it on a hashtag.
Very, very clever. So we've come to you a couple times this week already with some other topics, guys. I have to admit, since we put out the Carlos Boozer thing yesterday, which I wasn't on, I also haven't yet had the time to listen to it, but I promise I'm going to, because
it's really good, man. This is great. And look, Sam, you will love the contest that he's like pumping. If people didn't hear it yet, and Sam, you didn't hear it, I just want to mention really quick. It's a contest on DraftKings where you're trying to pick 0 games right. You're supposed to, yeah. Like if you get a single team in the Sweet 16, you're losing this contest.
so I have to just put in the opposite of the bracket that I put together.
Yep, exactly.
Perfect. Can't wait to tell you
no picking Duke in that bracket. So
I was gonna say I can't wait to tell you about how Oral Roberts is going to the Sweet 16 in my Boozer bracket. So guys, let's talk today about Oral Roberts. Like I said, this is Duke's first game in this tournament. Hopefully not Duke's last game in this tournament. It's tomorrow. It is in Orlando. And Oral Roberts is one of the most interesting teams coming into this tournament. Even if all you are reading is cursory NCAA tournament coverage, you have probably seen a lot of headlines about how the Duke Oral Roberts game in the first round is one of the most interesting games, and not just because Duke is in it. So let's quickly, Donald, run through Oral Roberts's performance this season, and I'll give you the broad strokes before I turn it over to you. They started off, you could say that they started off somewhat rocky, going just 1-3 against Division I opponents to begin the season. But that would severely understate the quality of the competition, because the 3 teams they lost to are St. Mary's, Houston, and Utah State, who collectively the worst of those teams is still in the top 20 in KenPom. They then proceeded to run the absolute pants off of everybody in the Summit League. They were perfect in the Summit League in the regular season. They blasted through the Summit League tournament. So they haven't lost in over 2 months and have looked pretty dominant, but against a schedule that is the Summit League is not the ACC. The Summit League isn't even the Pac-12. So Donald, what do you see from their performances this year?
So let me keep going with the broad strokes a little bit. 30-4 is their record right now. And like you mentioned, they were undefeated, 18-0 in the Summit League. They went through the Summit League tournament, defeating North Dakota by 16, St. Thomas by 5, and then they blasted North Dakota State in the final by 34. If we're looking at the metrics, they have they're 36th in the net and 56th in KenPom. So which you kind of look at these metrics and go, why is this team a 12 seed? And it's probably because of the committee probably underestimating the Summit League and how Oral Roberts just kind of dominated throughout that. But here's the deal. They've won 17 in a row. They have, like you mentioned, they only have 4 losses: St. Mary's, Houston, Utah State, and New Mexico. All 4 of those teams inside the top 55 in KenPom. They do have one top 100 win when it comes to KenPom. That was against Liberty. That's a non-conference game. Liberty's 48th. They just beat Rutgers, I believe. And I'm sorry, they beat Villanova in the NIT first round.
Liberty's legit. Liberty's legit.
They basically probably would have made the tournament had they won their conference tournament, but they lost to Kennesaw State. So Kennesaw State got the spot.
They 100% would have made the tournament if they won their conference tournament.
Well, what I mean is they had the record was strong enough to be considered outside of that. But
got them in my Final Four in the NIT, so I know they're good.
Yeah, they're very, very good. And when you look at, like you said, Sam, when you look at their wins, they aren't against a lot of quality competition. I mean, they were 0-4 against quad 1 teams, 1-0. I believe that game against Liberty was their only quad 2 win. And then they have a bunch of quad 3 and a lot of quad 4 wins. So the issue with this team is that when people look at how great they are, there's a lot of things that you can look at. I know Jason's going to get to some of the stats that they have, but we all remember what they did back in 2021. This was a team that was a 15th seed in 2021. They beat Ohio State and then beat Florida on their way to the Sweet 16, and then were within a couple of points of beating Arkansas, if I remember correctly, to get to the Elite Eight. So this was a team that a lot of people remember from a couple of years back. Everyone knows Max Abmas. We're going to talk a lot about him and how good he is. Connor Vanover, I know Jason's going to talk about him, the transfer from Arkansas, 7'5". He thinks he's Victor Wembanyama with how he plays. But this is the deal. They have a lot of experience. They have a lot of minutes continuity. They have, guys that have come back, and they have a lot of people in the system, and they really go with the same kind of lineup most of the time. So Duke just has to play their game. Duke, the great thing about Duke is that our defense has been playing very, very well. Our defense is what's been making Duke the trendy pick when it comes to people putting in the Final Four outside of Duke circles who always have them, going to the championship and winning it every year in their bracket. A lot of people are saying, hey, the defense has been what's carrying Duke over the last 3 weeks. We heard it from Kenny Denard. We heard it from Carlos Boozer yesterday. And now I'm saying it. This defense is going to be the key. It's going to be a great matchup between a team who is one of the most effective shooting teams in the country, at least according to KenPom, against one of the teams that has been one of the best defensive teams in the country over the last 3 weeks. So I turned it over to you guys, but that's the broad stroke about how they've been playing and what they've been playing yesterday over the last year. But at the end of the day, a lot of people are looking at their 3-point shooting and saying this team is scary. But at the end of the day, our defense has been carrying this team. It's going to be a great matchup no matter what. But this is one that obviously when you look at the seeding, Duke should win. And I think with our defense, that is going to be the major key if it shows up.
Jason, when we look at Oral Roberts, there's a number of things that stand out. Donald specifically highlighted Max Abmas and Connor Vanover, the giant. Maybe Vanover is where we want to begin, because Duke has not played that many huge guys this year. The one that obviously stands out, I think, to me is hopefully, or maybe not hopefully, the gentleman who Duke may see in the Sweet 16 for the second time this year, which is Zach Edey from Purdue. Is Vanover a guy like that, or is there something different to his game? And what is Derek Lively going to have to do to eliminate the threat of Connor Vanover?
So he's very different. I mean, other than the fact that he's a man mountain, the way Zach Edey is, other than the fact that he's ridiculously tall.
I don't make 7'5" guys in a lot of different varieties.
Right. No, but he is very different from Zach Edey. Donald did a nice job of mentioning, he thinks he's Victor Wembanyama. I don't know that he doesn't nearly have Wembanyama's ball handling skills, but in terms of where he tries to score, he's a really interesting player. This is a pick and pop specialist. And I want to be clear, Duke has Derek Lively, who is a pick and roll specialist. Lively sets a screen. He rolls to the bucket. He wants to shoot the ball inside of 5 feet, if not less than that, from the rim. Connor Vanover sets a screen and rolls to the perimeter. And pick and pop is very different, and it's very different to defend than pick and roll. Let me give you a little bit about Connor Vanover. Over 35% of his shots, only 35% of his shots come at the rim. That is a small percentage. To compare to Lively, 80% of Derek Lively's shots come at the rim. Ryan Young, 89% of his shots come at the rim. But Connor Vanover, for the most part, doesn't shoot at the rim. Basically, that 35%, those are offensive rebounds for the most part, and him just sticking them back. Do you want to know where he shoots? He steps outside. Almost 45% of the shots that Connor Vanover takes are from 3. Again, 7'5", and almost half his shots are coming from the 3-point line, and he hits about 33% of them. So he's not great, but he's decent. But one of the most amazing stats about his 3-point shots, 100%. Every single 3-pointer he has hit this year has been off an assist, which means someone passed it to him. He's not a guy who's out there, taking a couple dribbles or something like that. It is all pick and pop, pick and pop, pick and pop. That is what you need to think about with this guy.
Which makes sense, Jason, because when you're 7'5", dribbling is not something. I mean, he can throw the ball down to the ground. It's going to take a minute for it to get back up into his hands. So it's not like he's going to be creating off the dribble, which is funny when I say he's trying to be Victor Wembanyama. That is something that Victor Wembanyama does, which is mind-boggling. But for Connor Vanover, I think it's the issue with him is that Lively has not gone out onto the wing and played a lot where a guy is trying to find a shot. So how does he combat that, especially when you consider Zach Edey was somebody who was in the post and just, man mountain. This guy's going to be trying shooting from outside.
Jason, I feel like this year, Kyle Filipowski has been the better big on the perimeter for Duke when it comes to defense. We've seen Flip block some shots from outside. He doesn't have the lateral quickness, I think, to stay in front of guards, but in front of big guys, that's been the case. So do you think that guarding Vanover is mainly going to be Filipowski's job?
It's really interesting. Obviously, John Shire and the rest of the coaching staff are pouring through that calculus. It's worth noting that Vanover, like we said, he's not someone who's out there handling the ball. A lot of the guys that Filipowski has had to guard on the perimeter have been guys who literally play on the outside. That's not the case with Vanover. Vanover's a guy who's going to set screens and then move to the outside. So it's a matter of how, as a big man, you recover onto your man. And that, I think, is sort of the dilemma that Duke has, because Lively, I think, absolutely can do that. But if Lively's doing that, he's not going to be in the lane affecting the defense the way he usually does. And I kind of agree with you. I think it could be very interesting if Duke decides to put Kyle Filipowski on Vanover and let Lively guard someone else and try and stay a little bit closer to the basket. Because believe me, there is nothing that Oral Roberts would like more than dragging Derek Lively out to the perimeter, even if it's Connor Vanover essentially standing out there as a decoy, just to bring Derek Lively away from the hoop. I think that's something that they'll be very interested in trying. And by the way, just to sort of wrap up, or at least give you a little more on the Vanover situation, because you should know more about this guy. He's going to be so important in this game. He is not someone who goes and takes threes in the corner. Like he's not hanging out there. Corner threes, those are the guy like a guy like Jacob Grandison or Mark Mitchell, who, in the flow of the offense, they will be on the perimeter and they'll float down to the corner where that 3-pointer is a little bit closer. Connor Vanover has only taken 4 threes from the corner, 120. All the rest of his threes have come, out further, like foul line extended, which is what you would expect from someone who is setting screens and then rolling to the perimeter. So again, I keep on going back to pick and pop. That's what this guy does. It's also worth noting that when they get in a close game, a tough game, he shoots more and more from the perimeter. Connor Vanover in the 4 games that they lost, he took 6 threes twice. He took 9 threes in one of those games, 11 threes in the other one. So in those 4 games, he's averaging like 8 3-pointers a game. In their other games, he averages right around 4 3-pointer in terms of 3-point attempts per game. Last thing I want to say about Connor Vanover, He's 24. He's already 24. He's going to be 25 in June. This is a guy who's been playing college basketball forever. He's just a couple months younger than Marvin Bagley. When he enrolled in college, Derek Lively was still in middle school. I mean, just ruminate on that for a second. And this is a guy, we haven't really talked about it yet. And when I get into some of the advanced analytics, I'll bring it up. We've been talking nothing but his offense and what he does in terms of this pick and pop and how effective he is at it. Connor Vanover has helped remake the Oral Roberts defense. They are really good at preventing teams from hitting 2-point shots because 7'5" camped under the basket is rim protection. And that's a big deal in this game.
And the other guy that Oral Roberts features, he might be one of the biggest stat stuffers in all of Division I men's basketball. Fourth-year player Max Abmas, who has been playing almost every minute for Oral Roberts for like 3 years, and was a star on their team when they made it on that amazing Sweet 16 run a couple years ago. Only 6 feet tall, but is all over the place and not just scoring the basket. Pulls down a ton of rebounds for a guy of his size. So why don't you tell me a little bit about his game, and then maybe we can speculate a bit on what Duke has to do to contain this dynamite point guard.
So with Max Abmas, you're talking about a guy who's looking for the three-pointer. And I cannot stress that enough. Almost 60% of his shots come from behind the three-point line. And he's only assisted. Folks may remember earlier in the year when we were getting to the first time we were playing Carolina, I started looking at how much do guys take a three-pointer off an assist versus guys who take three-pointers off the dribble, because I think that's a big indication of what kind of three-pointer you're looking for. In the case of Max Abmas, only 47% of his three-point shots are taken off an assist, which means that he's taking a lot of them off the dribble. You've got to stay in his shorts. You've got to force him to be a driver, not a shooter. He's not someone who takes a lot of shots at the rim. So he's not a guy who wants to get in the, this is not Jeremy Roach who wants to get in the lane against you. This is a guy who wants to pull up and take a jumper from the perimeter. And I mean, the ideal would be to keep the ball out of his hands completely, because he is a truly elite passer. He's really great in the pick and roll or the pick and pop. He finds his teammates. He has a really high assist rate, and he never turns the ball over. When we get into more of the advanced stats, when I start talking advanced stats, you're going to hear me say, Oral Roberts does not turn the ball over, and the ball is always in Max Abmas's hands, and he just does not turn the ball over. And the last thing about him I want to mention, don't foul him. If the game's on the line, we cannot put this guy on the line. He hits 92% of his free throws. I mean, it's kind of amazing he's still there. For the past couple of years, he could have portaled out, gone to a bigger program, like literally any program in the country would have taken this guy and probably paid him big NIL bucks. Like, he could easily been making hundreds of thousands of dollars off of NIL deals and been a big-time player at a big-time program. If it were not for the fact that Oral Roberts was playing Duke, I would be rooting for this team like nothing ever. It's nothing but like nice things to say about these guys.
You might be rooting for them as long as you're into sort of the weird cult that Oral Roberts University is.
Put that aside. I'm just talking in terms of the team. Yeah.
Forgetting all of that. This is not a generic state school Florida Gulf Coast that we're talking about. But Donald, when you look at this guy, as Jason said, this is someone who probably should have transferred to a high D1 program, like sort of make the Seth Curry move 2 years ago. What do you think about the way that Duke is going to handle this kind of player?
It's interesting because he is a focal point, but as we've mentioned, there are other guys on Oral Roberts who can beat you. And I think shutting him down is going to be a key. And I don't know, guys, like, I feel like a Tyrese Proctor, who's been kind of handling the better guards, at least defensively. Yeah, I think he might be the guy to kind of put in front of Max Abmas, but it's going to be a team effort because, like you said, his ability to get other teammates involved in the plays is one thing, right? He can score as many points as he wants, but if you can affect an offense by getting your teammates involved, that's another. And it's going to take a team effort, but I think it starts with Tyrese Proctor. That's what I'm leaning towards. Obviously, we'll see on Thursday, but I think the gist of the matter is Max Abmas is going to be, if we can stop him and hold him like we've done so many other guys who are kind of like the head of the snake, so to speak, on other teams, we've been able to, knock that person down, and it's affected the rest of the team's output. And I think if we can do that with Max Abmas, you don't get the Vanover, step back threes, right? You don't get the pick and pops if he's not involved as much, or maybe they have to work harder at it and it forces them to make bad decisions. There's a team that doesn't really turn the ball over that much. And so if we can force him to turn the ball over, or at least make bad decisions, take bad shots, then we can build up a lead with momentum. And I think that's where you're going to need to have the key. Duke needs to find a way to get momentum from this team, because as an underdog in the NCAA tournament, momentum is like ratcheted up another level, right? Like we've seen so many underdogs come through and going on a quick run, getting the crowd behind them, gives them momentum that they can hold off a higher seed and get the upset. Duke can't allow that to happen. So it starts with Max Abmas, but I think the idea is shutting him down means shutting momentum down, or any chance for momentum, and that gives Duke the edge.
I'm looking back at some of Oral Roberts' performances from earlier this season, because I think it's hard when we look at this game to say what's Oral Roberts doing in the Summit League and comparing that to anything. So as I look at one of their first games of the season where they got blown out at Houston, who is a number one seed, completely reasonable for basically any team to get blown out on Houston's home court. But a couple things stand out to me. One, Abmas only went 1 for 9 from 3 in this game. He scored a total of 3 points. So I don't know if Houston was just smothering him or if he was having a bad shooting day.
Houston plays great. Houston plays great defense, and they're really
defense.
Experienced guards. I mean, yeah.
Completely. And Oral Roberts wasn't able to score at all. In fact, when you look at Houston's offensive numbers from that game, it's not like, oh my God, Houston, was bombing from 3 or they had some, they had a pretty normal shooting day. They just completely ruined Oral Roberts' ability to score. But the other thing that I noticed, Jason, you pointed out that Oral Roberts doesn't turn the ball over very often. In that game where Houston was obliterating them and Oral Roberts couldn't make anything happen on offense, they only turned the ball over 11 times. And for this Duke team this year, turning the ball over 11 times is great. Duke only turned the ball over 11 times. I'm sure they had a great chance to win. So can you walk me through, Jason, the rest of the advanced stats for Oral Roberts? You mentioned the turnovers, but what else stands out to you?
So the first thing I'll say before we get to the advanced stats is I think it's weird. It's difficult to evaluate a team that hasn't played a single team in the top 180. I mean, Donald kind of mentioned this early on. They haven't played a single team in the top 180 in college basketball since January 9th. It's been 2 months, 17 games since they played a team as good as Georgia Tech. So the stats are going to be a little skewed. I know that Ken Pomeroy and the other experts adjust their stats for who you're playing, but still, they're playing nothing but crappy teams. It's basically for the past 2.5 months.
And this is one of the most intriguing things because of all the talk about how good this game is going to be. To your point, Jason, they haven't seen an ACC team in a long, ex Louisville.
Yeah.
They haven't seen an ACC team in a while.
Well, look, even their non-conference games this year that we talked about, the decent teams they played, the St. Mary's, the Houstons, Utah State, New Mexico, none of those is a power conference team. Not that Houston isn't. I mean, Houston's great. No question about it. St. Mary's is very good, but none of those teams, maybe Houston, have the kind of athletes, the kind of future NBA players, NBA caliber athletes that you see in power conferences. And again, I'm not even talking about guys who maybe make it to the NBA, but guys who make it to the G League, guys who are NBA caliber athletes, which Duke has a roster full of. They haven't seen anything like that all year. All right, enough of that. As you had asked, I want to go through the advanced stats, even though I've given you this big caveat about how I wonder how legitimate they are because of the quality of the opposition for Oral Roberts. All right, and we will start with the efficiency numbers, and we have to start with those turnovers. We've mentioned them a bunch. They are second in the nation, number 2 in all of college basketball in their turnover percentage. They basically never throw the ball away. They also, in terms of efficiency, they shoot a stellar 37% from three. I mean, that's a big number. They're also really good at 2-point field goals. And as a result, they have the 7th best effective field goal percentage in the country. They're going to take a ton of 3-pointers. I already mentioned that Max Abmas takes a lot. The whole team takes a lot. 46% of their shots come from 3-point range. That's one of the highest percentages in the country. It is worth noting, Duke, maybe the best thing the Duke defense does is stop 3-pointers. Duke is elite. Our opponents only hit 30.4% from 3-point range. So the big question this game may be, is Oral Roberts able to hit their 37, 40% from three like they usually do, or does Duke hold them down around 30%? Because if we hold them to 30% or less, I think this is a very difficult game for Oral Roberts to win. A couple other things about their offense. They are terrible, awful at getting to the free throw line, like one of the bottom 20 teams in the country in terms of free throws taken. And let's remember, they're winning a bunch of games. So usually you get extra free throws at the end of a game you win because teams put you on the line. Oral Roberts, even with those extra free throws from winning all those games in the Summit League, is one of the bottom 20 teams in all of college basketball in terms of how often they get to the free throw line. They do hit a huge percentage of their free throws, up at 78%. And it's a good thing that this is a team that's very efficient, that they don't turn the ball over, that they are efficient from 2 and from 3, because they get almost no offensive rebounds. They're 305th in college basketball at offensive rebounding. Interestingly, though, they're pretty good at defensive rebounding. And this is again, Connor Vanover, the fact that he plays, that he's pick and pop, that he's on the perimeter on offense. On defense, he's standing right next to the basket. He's able to grab more rebounds. They're a fairly decent team at getting defensive rebounds. And the things they do on D, well, they don't foul very much. They don't put opponents on the line. They block shots because of Connor Vanover. They have the 4th highest, or Connor Vanover has the 4th highest block rate in the country. So they're good at blocking shots, but they don't force a lot of turnovers. Duke cannot make unforced mistakes against these guys. My goodness. If we were just throwing the ball away for no reason, it's going to be a disaster. And it is worth noting that they've been working really hard on improving their defense. They were 290th in defense a year ago. They're almost top 100 in defense this year. And that's a big difference. That's why a lot of people think they have a chance to make a run to the Sweet 16. And the last thing I want to mention about them, even though they have 7'5", Connor Vanover on the floor for them, 25 to 30 minutes per game, they're a really, really small team. Ken Pomeroy, who sort of adjusts your height for how many minutes everybody plays and that kind of stuff, Pomeroy says they are 156th in height. And again, that's with a 7'5" guy on the floor. He is the only player you will see in this game for Oral Roberts who's taller than 6'7". Mark Mitchell and Dariq Whitehead will be taller than everyone but Connor Vanover on the Oral Roberts team. That should give you a sense of how much bigger Duke is than Oral Roberts.
It's a fascinating matchup for Duke because we've also talked when Duke is playing these smaller teams, how they have to adjust the lineup a little bit. Like Ryan Young is almost like, I'll tell you now, Ryan Young's not playing a lot of minutes in this game unless, Duke is lured into a bunch of foul trouble with the bigs, because there's nobody for Ryan Young to guard if Oral Roberts' one big man is hanging out on the perimeter.
Well, and the other thing about the size issue for Oral Roberts is, and again, playing in the Summit, even playing Houston and New Mexico, teams like that, teams that aren't really, really big the way Duke is, I don't know who guards Kyle Filipowski for them. I mean, if it's Connor Vanover, does he follow Filipowski out to the perimeter? That's not his game. He plays out there on offense, but on defense, Connor Vanover does not want to be on the perimeter. All right, so is Connor Vanover guarding Derek Lively? And if he is, who is guarding Kyle Filipowski? Are they putting some 6'7" guy on Flip? That's going to be trouble for them. So they have a real matchup problem.
And if Flip hits the 3 like he's been doing, like he did in the ACC tournament very well, then that even, adds more pressure to Oral Roberts' defense. It makes him stretch him out a little bit more. And it might actually neutralize Connor Vanover a little bit because of the fact he'll be left on the island because everyone has to come out, and that will maybe open the lanes for people to drive to the basket too.
All right. So we will be back after Duke plays Oral Roberts. That is tomorrow. We're recording on Wednesday. The game is Thursday afternoon, or I guess Thursday evening, beginning of the evening session in prime time. Duke plays Oral Roberts. Hopefully, Duke makes it through that one and gets to play the winner of Tennessee and Louisiana, which will be right after that. So if Duke wins that game, we'll be back either that night or early Friday to preview the Saturday game.
Hey, I want to note, Sam, just really quick. I think there are probably Duke fans out there who feel really confident about the team. We just won the ACC tournament. We're on a 9-game winning streak with this trendy Final Four pick. I get all that. No one should think, if Duke loses this game to Oral Roberts, no one should think this was a huge, shocking upset. Ken Pomeroy has Duke as a 3-point favorite in this game. Most of the, like you look at the Vegas odds and stuff like that, this is not like a game that Duke's expected to win by double digits, not by a large margin. This is a very, very good Oral Roberts team. I'll say right now, the winner of this game, I think, goes to the Sweet 16, and I think even the winner of this game has a fairly decent chance of beating Purdue and going to the Elite Eight. That's how big this game is.
By the way, Jason, that's assuming like this half of Duke's bracket, you just skipped right on through the winner of Memphis and Florida Atlantic having to go up against Purdue after that. So, guys, let's take a quick break. When we come back, I know Jason has a little bit more on Duke's recent performance relative to the advanced metrics, and we need to quickly discuss the Duke women and their path to the Final Four. Stick around.
Why take one vacation with the family when you could take all of them? With Royal Caribbean, you don't just go to the beach. You visit a private island and race down the tallest water slide in North America. You don't just go for a road trip. You ATV and zip line through the jungle. You don't just go somewhere new. You rappel down waterfalls and discover ancient temples. Because this isn't just any vacation. This is all the vacations. Come seek the Royal Caribbean. Ships Registry, Bahamas.
We are back, and Jason, I know that sort of outside of the Oral Roberts game, you wanted to give us some highlights on Duke's recent performance, and I think you were looking at Bart Torvik's data to mine some nuggets.
Exactly. The fact that you can sort by date makes it oh so nice on Bart Torvik's website. I've been looking at February 14th till now. February 14th, of course, is the start of the Duke win streak that we're on, the current 9-game win streak. And Duke has been playing really slowly lately. And this is one of the keys to our team performing better. Over the past 9 games, since February 14th, this 9-game winning streak, Duke is 319th in the country in tempo. Again, they're like 360 teams in all college basketball. Duke is 319th. Up until February 19th, Duke was in like the 260s, 270s. I'm sorry, February 14th, I should have said. Duke was like in the 260s or 270s. So we've definitely slowed things down even more. Our turnover percentage since February 14th is just 14.9%, top 60 in the country. And that's such an improvement over earlier this year. From the start of the season through February 14th, Duke was 250th in turnover percentage, almost 20% turnover percentage. We've improved. If you cut your turnovers by 25%, which is what Duke has done, you're going to get a lot better on offense. So that is a just huge key to what Duke has done lately. And it's worth noting that up until February 14th, Duke was 69th in offensive efficiency. And since February 14th, we're in the top 10 in offensive efficiency. So it's just, the fact that our turnovers have fallen by 5 percentage points, our 3-point shooting has risen very respectably. We're shooting like better than 36% from 3 now. There's a very good reason that this Duke team is a trendy Final Four pick. Duke and UConn are the only 2 teams in the country with a top 20 offense and top 20 defense in the past month of college basketball. That's why Jay Billis says Duke and UConn in the national championship game.
Love it. Let's let's hope that the trends continue. The thing about the pace is really interesting to me because this is so not a Coach K thing. That, when we were asking Kenny the other day about, what's different about this Duke program, he said, or we sort of asked him to compare John Shire's approach to Coach K's approach. And Kenny said that he appreciates that, like, Shire is really doing a lot of his own thing when it comes to strategy and play calling and the way that he's sort of deploying the players that he has available to him. I don't think that the recruiting has changed really much at all. Like Shire was running the recruiting before, and it seems like he's still running the recruiting. But in terms of his game planning, I think we haven't given enough credit to the fact that he has not strayed, but allowed himself to go into the game planning without a ton of Coach K on his shoulder.
Yeah, it's funny. The tempo being slow, when you hear those numbers in the 300s, I'm like, wow, we're channeling our inner Virginia with that tempo. And it's almost like we beat them at their own game the other night when we slowed down the tempo and was, methodical and executing very well and really being efficient with what we were doing in our time with the ball. And I think, Jason, besides the tempo, I think the one thing that's been, the biggest improvement, at least from the eye test, has been the number of turnovers. We've held on to the ball lately. That's one thing you need to do in the NCAA tournament. That's one thing you need to do in the ACC tournament. That's one thing we needed to do throughout the entirety of the regular season. And it was one of our Achilles heels all year. And so the fact that we've been improving that as we've crept towards March has been great. And that's what we need to keep continuing throughout this tournament, throughout March.
And I feel like what Duke is doing on offense, as they've slowed down so much, is, especially late in the shot clock, we're putting the ball in the hands of Kyle Filipowski and Jeremy Roach, and we're just letting them do their thing. There were times earlier in the year where I feel like, we're putting it in the hands of Tyrese Proctor. I think Proctor has it earlier in the clock, but when the clock runs late, it's Flip and Roach, and they've each sort of taken turns taking over at times in that situation. It's worked really well. And the fact that we have two different guys that can do it, depending on what the other team is doing defensively, is a real advantage for Duke.
Let's turn very quickly at the end here to the women's bracket, where Duke is the number 3 seed in the corner of the bracket that Stanford is in charge of. Stanford, of course, traditionally being one of the best programs in women's basketball. Women's tournament works a little bit differently. And Donald, I know you're going to walk us through some of the competition here, but just so folks are aware of the logistics, the first 2 rounds of the tournament are hosted in the home arena of the top seeded team from that pod. So Duke being a 3 seed means that those games are in Cameron Indoor. If Duke wins those games, they presumably move on to face Iowa State out way on the other side of the country in Seattle. So, Donald, can you walk us through maybe Duke's path to the Final Four here and what you're looking for from the Duke women headed into March?
Yeah, and real quickly on the regions that they have this year, they're doing things a little bit differently in the women's tournament this year. Traditionally, like the men, they usually have 4 regional sites with a Final Four. This time around, there's only 2. So what they did was they took 2 regions, and those regions will both play in Greenville, South Carolina. And then the other 2 regions, of which one of those involves Duke, will play in Seattle. And the winners of those regions will meet in the Final Four in Dallas. So it's very interesting how that works.
How much does it suck that, because, really you could have gone, Duke had a 50-50 shot at Greenville, which would have been like a bus drive, as opposed to Seattle, which is 3 time zones. I mean, Seattle's as far away from Duke, I think, as you can get in the United States.
Well, most likely, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think when it comes to their draw, I think, right, you mentioned, Sam, they're a 3 seed in the Seattle 4 region is what they're calling it. So we'll call it Seattle 4 for continuity purposes. Stanford, as you mentioned, is the 1. Iowa is the 2. Caitlin Clark, one of the best players, if not the best player in college basketball.
I said Iowa State. I'm very sorry about that.
Yeah, no, it's cool. But Caitlin Clark, if you have not watched her play, she's
special. She is really special.
Yeah. Texas is the 4. Louisville the 5. They open up against Iona, which is the 14th seed, again, as you mentioned, Sam, at Cameron Indoor Stadium. So if you're in Durham, or you can get to Durham this weekend, go check that out, support the women as they move on. But here's the funny thing. I think, entering this tournament, Duke had a 50.8 points per game opposing team average, right? So it means every team that they played, those teams averaged just under 51 points a game. I think that's the best that the ACC team has done in over 20 years. Like, this is a really good defensive team. Stop me if you've heard this before. Duke teams being very good defensively in 2022-23. So that gives Duke a very big advantage against, some of these teams. But what needs to come around is the scoring. They've had some scoring ruts. Again, stop me if you heard that before on the men's side, but on the women's side, they've had some scoring ruts, and that's kind of where they've fallen short in some of these games. One team that they could potentially meet in the Sweet 16 if they get through, they would have to get past Iona and then either Colorado or Middle Tennessee State. But in the Sweet 16, Iowa actually has a rough go of it because they could face Florida State, who is a 7th seed, in the round of 32. And Florida State's been pretty good this year. Florida State actually beat Duke earlier this year. If you remember, that's the game where they played with the men's ball for the first half of the game, and Florida State eventually won that game. So Florida State, that could be a rematch game in the Sweet 16. But also on the other side, if Stanford doesn't get there, if Louisville doesn't get there, you have Texas there, and Texas is also a really good team. So Duke has a pretty good, pretty strong group here in this region. But the big catch is if they do make it to the Final Four, which again is in Dallas, their Final Four opponent would be none other than the undefeated and defending national champion South Carolina. So they have their work cut out for them, but this is a team that if they can play defensively the way they have all season, and if they can get their scoring going, this is a team that can make a run, and I think you could see them in the Final Four. That's what I have them going to the Final Four, meeting up with South Carolina in what would be a ridiculous game. But the one thing that Duke needs to do is every time they've played some of these top tier teams in previous years, they would kind of fall short, right? Like they'd play the UConns, they'd play the Tennessees, and they would fall short. This year, they've started to pick some of those teams off. While they did lose to UConn, they have beaten Virginia Tech during the regular season. They did beat Louisville during the regular season. They beat Notre Dame during the regular season. So those games are preparing them for this moment when any team that they face can be one that they're not afraid of. And so hopefully we see this team do well. Again, the first 2 rounds would be in Durham at Cameron. So if you're in the area, definitely make it out there and support the women. They're going to need our support. And we wish them well all the way. And honestly, go beat South Carolina, go beat these teams, because I think they can. And, with Kara Lawson, anything can happen.
All right. So let's leave it there. I guess before we go, maybe we need to, we don't have time to do like full breakdowns of our brackets, but just very quickly, Jason, who do you have in the Final Four, and who do you have winning the 2003 men's basketball Division I championship?
I don't have a single 1 seed in the Final Four. I don't know how I did that, but I've got Arizona and Duke on one side. I've got Texas and Gonzaga on the other side. And I, of course, have the Blue Devils winning it all over Gonzaga in the championship game.
Donald?
So I have not finalized this yet, but right now, here's what I have. I have Arizona and Duke on one side. I have Texas and Kansas on the other side. And I have Duke over Texas. Why? Because my brother went to Texas, and I would love to hang this over his head for the rest of his life.
I feel like we suffer from a little bit of groupthink. I have Duke beating Texas also in the championship. So I guess none of us believe in definitely very awesome Houston. I guess if Marcus
I've got Houston losing to Indiana.
Yeah, if Sasser doesn't come back, they're in trouble.
Yeah, if Sasser doesn't come back, and I think as of right now, we still don't know if Sasser's going to be playing. He didn't play in the championship game last weekend against Memphis. So that seems like a big deal for Houston. I'm very glad that Duke's injuries issues seem to currently be behind them.
But by the way, Miami has the same. Norchad Omier apparently has not practiced with Miami yet. They're still saying he's day to day, but I would be picking Miami to make a real run. I think they are a very legit team. Without Omier, forget it. No way. I think I've got them losing in the first round if they don't have him.
So I've got Duke over Texas, and then I also have Alabama in the Final Four. I think both of you guys said you picked Arizona. Alabama, totally reasonable to send to the Final Four, I feel like. But it'd be great if they...
Sam, dude, I thought you said you wanted to avoid the Alabama story. Duke and Alabama in the Final Four?
But I'm already picking with my with my heart by taking Duke to the championship. As hot as Duke is, I can't say, oh, Duke's been hot the last month, let me pick them in the championship, looking at all these other teams who have been hot and being like, nope, I'm good. And then I also have Gonzaga taking out UConn in the Elite Eight. So I've got Gonzaga in the Final Four against Texas. The one super fun thing that I have going on here is I've got a second round matchup between Drake and Kent State. So I've got Miami losing to Drake, and I've got Indiana losing to Kent State. And if that happens, you heard it here first.
Nice. Well done, sir.
All right. Excellent. Guys, let's get out of here, and we'll be back after hopefully Duke wins their first game in the NCAA tournament. For Jason Evans and Donald Wine, I'm Sam Klein. This has been Duke Basketball Report podcast, episode 501. Duke Band, take us home.
Does that say
$0.68? It is a dividend check from Microsoft. My dad had, in his estate, had one share of Microsoft that he'd had for years. I don't know why, I mean, he had plenty of investments. For some reason, he had one share of Microsoft. It took me, my father passed in 2018. 18. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's taken me like 4 years just to get this one share passed from his name to my name. Finally got that done. I'm not even sure how to fucking sell it at this point.
Hey, I only have
it's
one.
Still in this crazy account. It's bonkers.
It's funny. I bought one share of Apple, and this was I had no idea this was happening, but literally the next day they announced that they were splitting the stock, and so it ended up being 4 shares. And I was like, oh, well, this is why you just buy one, because the next day it just magically splits. But no, the funny thing about that check, right? So when we had Food Points, they did the whole they had it where at the end of the semester you get a check.
I'm listening. Keep going. Yeah.
So what they did was at the end of the semester they give you a check for whatever you had left. I always tried to make it where there was 1 penny left, just to see if they would write a check for 1 penny. So the first semester I tried this was my junior year. I think first semester, I got 1 penny. They wrote a check for 1 penny. The next semester, I think it was 3 cents. They wrote a check for 3 cents. My senior year, I was like, oh, we're still doing this. It's literally they have to put 30. It's a 39 cent at that point. It's a 39-cent stamp. It costs money to print the check. They're spending way more on this check than the check is worth. So when they sent it my senior year, I had again made it to a penny. And this was when I was in football, so I got recurring Food Points every 2 weeks.
Right.
So I got a check for the remainder, which was 2 pennies. I'm sorry, 1 penny. And they wrote me a check for $1. They're like, just it's going to cost this much anyway. Just take the $1.
That's pretty good.
And the funny thing was taking it to the bank, and I'm like, yeah, I got to deposit this check, and they're just like, really?
Yeah.
Hey, man, they gave it to me to check. I'm like, what do you want me to do? I didn't make the check. I'm just depositing it.
Let me give you a big Labor Day surprise. Most people think if we all exercise the same and eat the same, we'd all look the same. And let me tell you why that's wrong. Your body is unique and your metabolism is unique. I'm Lacey Green and I'm a super trainer at Body. That's BODI.com. And you can't see me, but I don't look like your average personal trainer. I'm curvy and I'm proud of it. So I created a program for beginners only on the Body app to show people like us how to get incredible results and be our version of happy and healthy. This isn't just workout videos. videos. It's people like you and me. It's community. It's incredible trainers. It's easy to follow nutrition and mindset experts to help you reduce stress and just feel better. And you can get started with my new program called For Beginners Only. Now, here's the big surprise. If you go to body.com right now, that's BODI.com, not only can you get everything Body has to offer at 50% off with an annual membership, you'll also get an additional 20% off, but only during Labor Day weekend. Let's do this together. Go to body.com. That's body with an I.com.